Disneyland is celebrating what it says is a major operational improvement, claiming attractions delivered 1.5 million more ride experiences in 2025 thanks to increased uptime. But the announcement raises an obvious question. If the park can suddenly add that much ride availability in a single year, just how bad was the downtime before? After years of guest complaints about broken attractions and frequent closures, Disney now says changes to maintenance schedules, parts availability, and operations have dramatically improved reliability. The milestone may sound like good news, but it also highlights just how much ride capacity had been lost to maintenance issue in the past. So let's talk about it today on That Park Place. Guys, here from That Park Place, written by the wonderful and talented Cham Lee, or as I like to call her, Chamley, or Chamberly. I sometimes call her Chamberly. Disney announces increase in attraction uptime by 1.5 million rides in 2025. Officials have said that the park recorded about 1.5 million additional ride experiences, up from 2025 compared with the prior year. Resort leaders attributed the increase to operational changes that reduced unplanned attraction downtime. Executives shared the information during a recent Disneyland Resort business update. So, we have got Natalie Kotska, Director of Attractions Engineering Services at Disneyland Resort, who outlined several areas that contributed to the increase in uptime. I believe a lot of it had to do with shape language. She said that the teams focused on preventative maintenance, quicker response times, and improved coordination across departments. She also explained that the 1.5 million figure represents more completed ride cycles across the resort. However, Disneyland did not release detailed uptime percentages for individual attractions. Instead, the officials emphasized broader year-after-year gains tied to operational refinements. Moreover, leadership noted that downtime can result from technical issues, regulatory requirements, and guest-related safety concerns. Therefore, the resort reviewed both mechanical systems and operational procedures when addressing reliability. Now, there were also maintenance adjustments. Resort officials said attraction maintenance generally falls into three categories: overnight safety work, scheduled refurbishments, and unplanned downtime. However, during the update, leaders said they expanded overnight maintenance windows to complete more preventative tasks outside of park hours. In addition, teams reviewed parts of management systems to ensure critical components remain readily available. Having necessary parts on hand helped reduce the length of certain closures. And for example, Radiator Springs Racers operated with more vehicles available on most days late in 2025, which supported steadier operations during peak periods. However, availability of parts sometimes slows maintenance, as does the limited number of hours repairmen have overnight. The other problem that often slows rides is simply the guests, whether that be slow loading and unloading or outright unsafe behavior. Disney says guest behavior now contributed to 13% of ride downtime, up from the normal 10%. This includes things such as not securing loose items to standing up mid-ride. God, people are terrible. To address this, Disneyland evaluated loading and unloading procedures at select attractions. Adjustments to these processes aim to improve throughput and reduce delays. While officials did not quantify specific ride changes, they described the improvements as incremental and system-wide. Vash Sky, sounds like they're doing a lot more preventative maintenance now, but that begs the question, why weren't they already doing that?
Yeah, that is begging the question for sure. This information comes to us from this kind of recent DCA 25 Media Summit event that they had, and they were very candid about a lot of the operational changes coming to Disneyland Resort, which is very, very interesting. Some of those things already been implemented. Some of those things are obviously in the process of being implemented. We're actually going to be talking about something very interesting related to cast members, actually, on Vashkai Parkcast coming up here. So that's going to be very, very cool. But when it comes to ride time, yeah, I guess they were saying that 13% of the ride time, or the downtime, I should say, related to the attractions at Disneyland Resort were caused by guests. And it was like, oh, that's very interesting. That means 97%, I'm sorry, 87% were caused by Disney themselves, or at least that's the math I'm doing in my head, at least, on a napkin right there. I look, they talk about it too. They talk about how green cast members were, right? Only 50% of the cast members that were unfortunately fired over there, I believe October, or at least the fall of 2020. We're talking like 28,000 cast members at that time. Only 50% of those actually come back. And they talk about how they had to shorten the onboarding process, right? Shorten traditions, shorten all this stuff. And it was all kind of related not to customer service, or even to the extent of managing these ride systems, but it was actually they had to focus on like COVID protocols and so forth, which was really really sad. So you have a lot of these kind of green cast members operating these ride systems, and unfortunately, you get, I think, extended breakdowns associated with that. Also, too, you have maintenance technicians who, that's you can't find a maintenance technician to service a lot of these custom fabricated ride systems from all these different providers, under a rock. You have to really seek them out. So all of these things kind of create a witch's brew of downtime relating to the Disneyland Resort. And I will give it up to Thomas Moslem. It looks like there's an enhanced emphasis on, turning this whole thing around, which is good. But the question, does come in, like what was going on during this time? What did fall between the cracks? And I think some of these things that we're seeing, like we just covered the Tiana story, for example, other things might be being addressed, but you do have to wonder what did happen behind the scenes to cause all this.
Right. Absolutely. When you said, look under a rock, I was about to play a Wilson clip, and then I realized we don't have any Wilson clips back here anymore.
Let's
They're
go.
They're all gone. I have a feeling Jonas did a purge.
I think they focus too much on the whole mask wearing thing, instead of training people elsewhere how to handle situations. And I feel like post pandemic, a lot of people are more careless, more daring, more frustrated. There's more like rage. And let's face it, the past few years have not been easy. People are on a budget, even more than ever, like tighter with money, if you will. So they're expecting, all of these things when they go into the theme park, and then they're acting out. They're getting out of rides. They're taking particles that can get loose on an attraction, and that can ruin it for everyone. And it just delays things. And then there's an uproar, and then there's a riot, and just a bunch of chaos. And if the cast members are not being trained how to handle that type of situation, it can get really ugly.
It can get really ugly, and you got to think, right? Take Space Mountain, for example. That attraction opens at Disneyland Resort in 1977. It's a 70s era coaster, which means that, hey, if you are late in getting people on board and in their seats, and those rockets actually dispatched, that ride can what they call a cascade, right? Where it backs up to a certain point in which no other rockets can actually go through the actual course, and now the whole attraction actually has to go down, and you have to reset on that level right there. On Space Mountain, it's very difficult to work that attraction, right? Because you have less than 20 seconds to actually dispatch every single rocket, which is, it's a lot. And that's why you've seen so much B-roll on this channel actually highlighting that specific attraction, because I just think it's really, really cool operationally. But if, let's say, you're a cast member who's not used to that and that environment and so forth, you can see how that might be damaging when it comes to uptime related to that attraction. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad has a lot of, intricacies and unique operations to keep that uptime up. But if you don't know those things, as has been passed down by leads and other cast members and so forth, you could be left in a bind, and now that attraction is going down more than it actually should. Even a little thing like ears, for example. Hey, make sure you take off your ears on Rise of Resistance so that big wind scene doesn't actually fling them off, and now you have a foreign object on the actual track, and now that goes down. It's all these little things that really add up to big gains. I think that's what they were highlighting here. Right.
Now, Erika, the Disney difference that, we used to always talk about involved a lot of, and just involved the experience in general. And a lot of that had to do with preventative maintenance. Do you think that the Disney parks in the past years, maybe since COVID, have put less of an effort into preventative maintenance? And is that why it's happening? Or is it the fact that a lot of these new attractions are so advanced that they're breaking down more often? Or it may be some combination of the two? What do you think?
Combination of the two. I think Imagineering is trying to be very advanced. I think they're in over their heads a little bit. And those budget constraints that may be limiting them. But, and then cast training. Well, I completely squirreled just now.
Squirreled?
Yeah, my brain just went flat. Holy cow.
I understand.
Well,
go ahead, Val.
Well, I was just going to say, Disneyland Resort has a very unique relationship when it comes to preventive maintenance. A lot of those preventive maintenance standards were dropped during the 1990s, during the Paul Pressler era. And unfortunately, 2 people lost their lives because of that, right? And so ever since then, it was like, okay, we're going to put preventive maintenance at the forefront of what we do. But I think you're right, Marvin. I think preventive maintenance was sidelined during this time because there were other priorities, like getting the 30,000 or so cast members on board and getting that this resort operational after having been closed for 412 days. The other thing, Marvin, which is very interesting that they actually highlighted at this media summit, was like they couldn't get parts related to operating these attractions in a timely fashion because a lot of the factories in China and where they actually source these parts from were actually down. Like Radiator Springs Races, for example, they couldn't get all of the cars to be on that track because there's a certain amount of hours relating to every single one of those cars, and when those thresholds are met, you have to actually overhaul those individual riot vehicles, and they just couldn't get the parts to do that. And so it's
you jogged my memory. I remember there. I don't know who said it or where it was reported, but I remember someone making a statement that worked for Disney that would typically over order on parts on purpose, right, and they weren't supposed to, but they would do it anyway, wink, wink. But then that stopped. And then, because the parts were coming from China and there was all this, with the pandemic, everything just kind of came out of hold and getting what they needed for maintenance. But I totally forgot about that. And things just kind of got backlogged, like bottlenecks.
Right. Well, in 1967, there's a famous story of Alice Davis, right, where she is doing the costumes for all of the figures related to the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction. And when she was given a budget, they didn't quite know how much fabric that they would, need for one costume, and that's all that I heard.
And she over order?
Yes,
on purpose.
So they allotted only one costume to her, but she was like, "Hey, we gotta have some for backups," and so she just ran the credit card and just ordered enough for multiple. And when there was a fire that took that attraction, they go to Alice Davis and say, "Hey, how quickly can you actually get costumes to built for this attraction?" It's like, "Hey, don't worry, I have a storeroom here with all of these backups." So it does take cast members and people working on the team who actually know these attractions intimately, know what could pop up, and actually care about the product that they're actually putting out.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, guys, it's good news for Disneyland, though, because more uptime is a good thing. So the question now is, and I'll pose this to Erika. Do you think that Disneyland is making a turn for the better? Do you think maybe the dark times are behind us when it comes to these maintenance issues?
I hope so. Right now, I don't trust the brand right now. I'm really at a complete distrust with them. So they're really going to have to
mean excellence anymore, right? Like it used to mean excellence, and it used to mean like give you the warm fuzzy feelings, and now it does.
Yeah, you could eat off the floors. It was so clean. You went on the attractions. You didn't worry about anything happening. And now you have to worry even about the attitude you're going to get on the other side, of the where you're checking out or cashiering. And I really hope that I hope tomorrow has been taking like silent notes, and maybe we're going to get back to some of that old training and go back to what Disney used to be and get those standards back up. Because looking at Disney and seeing their standards, be dropped to basically the European parks out here that mimic and mock Disney, that's really disturbing for me. I'm like, that, no. Like when I go to Disney, it's because you're set apart from other parks like Europa Park and Phantasialand and Holiday Park and all these other places and Alton Towers. And they're getting almost a Six Flags reputation. And it's like, y'all really need to fix that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Vash, do you think that they are making a turn for the better?
I think so. I wasn't entirely convinced when I heard the reports coming out of this media summit and what I had heard them saying, but as more detail has been applied, and we're actually going to pick Disney Drew, the Disney dude, his brain on this, because he actually attended this media summit and actually got to spend 2.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken, with Disney leadership on all of this stuff and hearing what they had to say. And now that more detail has fortunately been brought out, I am more convinced that they are taking these things seriously. You got to understand, Marvin, Disneyland is not quite like Walt Disney World. Disneyland is a very supply-driven business. The maximum amount of people that you can have in those parks are predicated on the amount of attractions that you can actually provide. So when you have multiple attractions going down, that limits how many people you can actually service. And so maybe you allowed in 50,000 people that day, but when you have multiple attractions going down, that's no good for anybody, especially those buying those premium Lightning Lane services.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we're going to see whether this is a turning point for Disney or whether these preventative maintenance issues are going to go down for refurbishment.
Thanks for watching That Park Plays News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.